From magazine covers to viral social media posts, image editing has blurred the lines between what is art and what is authenticity. And in this episode of the show, we're going to be unpacking the Photoshop controversy. And we're going to explore the impact that it has on body image, on industry standards, and also on public perception. So let's dive in.
Are you tired of the endless stream of fantasy marketing and vanity metrics? Yeah, so am I. My name is James Patrick, and I'm an internationally published photographer, media specialist, and marketing strategist. As a creative entrepreneur, I face the same exact frustrations you have, being bombarded by generic advice that promises success but never lives up to the hype. We need to move beyond the posturing, beyond the facade, beyond the image to navigate the unique challenges we face as creatives. Together, we're going to dive into real stories, real strategies, and the real work that can lead to the real results. This is the Beyond the Image podcast.
What is going on? And thank you so much for tuning into this earliest episode of the Beyond the Image podcast. I'm honored that you can take some time to get some information, get a little inspiration to help you in your entrepreneurial journey. If you are tuning in via YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel so much. For those of you tuning in through our podcast channels, whether it's Apple, Spotify, etc., appreciate your reviews, appreciate your subscriptions, and appreciate you sharing this show with a friend. All right, so Photoshop controversies. And really, this boils down to how much Photoshop condones too much Photoshop. Now, as a photographer for more than 20 plus years, I've had a few controversies touch my work, or I should say, my work has edged into a few controversies. The first, over a decade ago, I had a few images of mine of a single subject, a single individual, that were publicized internationally in news outlets for being over photoshopped, with the subject vehemently denying it. And this subject appeared. She appeared in magazine interviews. She appeared on television interviews talking about this Photoshop controversy and denying that any Photoshop was done to her photos, that any adjustment to how she was portrayed was completely accurate as it was shown in the photos. Now, it's important to note that she lied. Two things that she lied about. The first was that she actually planted the story. And what I mean by that is no one was actually claiming her photos were overly photoshopped, but she created this, scare quote, controversy via a press release to generate media coverage for herself, fighting these critics who are claiming that her photos were photoshopped. Okay. So no one was actually attacking her, saying her photos were photoshopped, but she was able to construct a news story that she had to fight against people who are saying her images were photoshopped. Number two is, well, yeah, of course the photos were edited. They were photoshopped. Now, every photo that leaves my work, that leaves my studio, has some form of post-production applied to it. Now, in these specific photos of her, none of the edits changed the shape of her body. And that was the contention that she was using in her press release. The edits were, excuse me, most specifically brightness, contrast, sharpness, color correction, and there was a little bit of frequency separation to lighten the skin tones. But through this whole thing, not a single media outlet, not one journalist, not one news producer, no one reached out to me as the photographer of these images for comment on this story. And that's how I knew it was a place story. Because if this were not a place story, if this was a legitimate news story, it would have been the journalist's responsibility, their due diligence, to interview the photographer. I had another client who owned her own magazine. This client chose to stop working with me because I actually refused to over edit her photos. And she took the photos that I did of her and she ran them through photo editing apps on her phone. And these apps erased all of the detail in her skin, in her face. It removed all the shadow, all the lines, and ostensibly it removed decades from her age. And that's what she chose to publish in her magazine. Now, I was told through the grapevine that now she has her assistant take her photos with a mobile phone from far away so that the resolution is low enough that you can't see the details in her skin when the photos are printed. Is that misleading? It could certainly be argued that it is. So let's look at context, because I think context matters. My first job in photography was at a newspaper photo desk. I started as a photojournalist and then became the photo editor of a small weekly newspaper. My ability to use Photoshop was restricted to brightness, contrast, and sharpness. And that's pretty much it. The rule that we had to follow was very simple. Nothing could be done to change a context of an image. Nothing. Even cropping could be seen as misleading if you were cropping out important elements of an image that told a story of an image. Now, one could argue how a photographer's composing an image is manipulation. Yeah, that's also kind of the point I'm going to get to. But the rule that we had at the newspaper as a photojournalist was nothing could be done to change the context of an image because of why the image was being used. It was used to communicate news. And we could not distort, or our intention was we should not distort what we are presenting to the audience. Now, as a commercial photographer, which I am now, those restrictions, which for photojournalists exist for a very important reason, they don't exist to the same degree as a commercial photographer. And this is not a good thing, and this is not a bad thing. This is just what is. When I shoot commercially, whatever image I take, it is trying to sell something, some product, some service, some idea, some concept. And thus, every pixel becomes fair game to create the end result, the end product, the end image that is trying to sell something. Let's look at an industry that I am not in, like let's say certain elements of fine art photography, where Photoshop is just as integral to the medium as the taking of the photo itself. This is not misleading manipulation. This is an artist using the tools at their disposal to create the work that they're trying to create. Now, we're in a phase where it's extremely easy to doubt what we see because there is an abundance of photo editing apps, of filters, of AI enhanced manipulation. And it has become hard to distinguish what is real and what's not. But also, I need you to consider this, and this is important. The lens I choose when I'm taking a photo, the lens I choose, and we're going to think about portraiture. The lens I choose is going to change how someone looks. When I use a wide angle lens, it is going to stretch and distort and bend the body in certain ways. The composition of the image is going to change how someone looks. If I get down low and shoot up, it is going to change how someone looks versus if I'm up high and shooting down. If I get real close, it is going to change how someone looks versus if I'm far away and I'm zooming in. All of it changes how someone looks. When we put someone through hair and makeup, that changes how someone looks. When we style someone, that changes how that person looks. The lighting I'm using and how I'm setting up my light is going to change how that person looks. We can make a person look thinner simply by how we're lighting them, how the lens we're choosing, the styling we're choosing, and the composition of the photo itself. We can make someone look more muscular with makeup, with lighting. How we pose someone changes how that person looks. You look at magazine covers, people don't stand around in the poses that they're on a magazine cover. They're posed in a flattering way to communicate an idea. And that idea could be strength, it could be beauty, could be vulnerability, could be confidence. They are posed in a certain way to convey a meaning, to convey a message. I mean, even look at something as simple as a fan blowing someone's hair. That's changing how they look, how we are seeing them in this photo. We don't walk around with someone tracking us with a fan. Every single one of these elements manipulates what someone looks like in a photo, but not a single one of them involved Photoshop. Understand that the cameras I use take like 40 to 50 million pixels per image. That's a lot of data. That's a ton of data, especially when you pull up an image on your computer and you're looking at 400%. You're going to see things in this photo that you took that you never saw with your naked eye. So my personal philosophy when it comes to editing is I want to bring an image back to what I believed I saw with my eyes when I took that photo. Here's an analogy. You're out in the evening. You see this great sunset. You take a photo of the sunset. You look at the photo. When you look at the photo, you realize there's power lines in the photo. You see some houses in the background. You didn't notice those things when you saw the sunset. You just saw the sunset. You wanted to take a photo of the sunset. My camera captures everything. Everything we never notice. So this is how I see portrait work. I want to bring my portrait back to what I saw with my eyes and what most people would see with their eyes. We're going to see past certain things that the camera's going to pick up on. So when is too much too much? Well, honestly, I believe this is about the context of an image. If I'm selling a person, I think that image should properly represent what we believe that person looks like when we see them with our eyes. That would be a proper representation of that person. If I changed a person too much in editing, or I'm changing the tones of their skin, if I'm removing beauty marks or moles, if I'm shifting the color of their hair, if I'm changing the shape of their body through aggressive photo editing, to me, in my personal subjectivity, that would be too much. However, if I'm selling a product or service, I feel like that image has a lot more bandwidth of what I would consider to be appropriate for editing. But see, it's the subjectivity that's the point. Now, as a photographer, I get hired for my discernment when it comes to photo editing because my approach to photo editing is an integral part of my style as a photographer. When people see my work, they're hiring me for what I create. But it's also important to note that there are photographers who get hired because they dedicate more time and energy to editing, more time and energy to post-production, more time and energy in the digital manipulation or the digital art of editing a photo. And I get passed up for jobs like the aforementioned one because I don't do that. And that's the point. Ultimately, as photographers, I feel it's our responsibility, and as business owners, that we need to have an open and transparent dialogue with our clients regarding expectations of post-production. We should have our personal, which are subjective, and that's okay, comfort level of what we are willing to do and what we are not willing to do, and be forthcoming with our clients about those restrictions or limitations or beliefs or methodology when it comes to our photo editing. I don't feel this is ultimately a right or wrong. I feel this is clarity of choice of what is right for us. And when we decide what is right for us, we can then properly and clearly communicate it so that we can have the right clients who agree with our approach or our methodology on how we're editing photos. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Beyond the Image podcast. As always, appreciate your subscriptions on YouTube, for following the show, subscribing to the show, for leaving reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If there are any topics you want me to cover in future episodes of Beyond the Image, shoot me a DM at jpatrickphoto on Instagram. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.